Well, good morning. It is a pleasure and an honor to be with you this morning as our pastor finishes the last week of his vacation. We are excited about him coming back and sharing what God's put on his heart over these last couple of weeks. So this morning, we're going to be looking at the book of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 36 through 38. If you want to go ahead and go there, full disclosure, we'll be looking largely at a lot of chapter 9 as we walk through this morning. So the title of this sermon is The Visual Acuity of Faith. Now, really, that's just a fancy way of saying the clarity with which we see. For those of you who are like me that wear some sort of corrective lenses, whether contacts or glasses, you understand this perfectly. When I wake up in the morning, I cannot see anything. I always get confused. I think I'm nearsighted, meaning I can see kind of like right in this zone, but I would not be able to tell who Ben Stokes was if my contacts were out. I might not even be able to tell that there was a table right here if my contacts were out, right? And so I have to go to the optometrist and have them do all those tests. And if you've been in that chair, you know what it's like where, is this one clear or is it? And it's like a mind game. It's like, I don't think anything, is this a test? It's just weird. But those guys are geniuses and they can get the lenses that we need so that we can see clearly. So the idea this morning is this, not just our physical visual clarity or acuity, but spiritually speaking, that we can see with eyes like Jesus. That we could have eyes like Jesus. So I want to read this passage in Matthew chapter 9, beginning in verse 36. When Jesus saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them because they were weary and worn out like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest." See, the eye is an amazing organ. I was reading some things on Google, just kind of quick fast-checking facts about the eye, and it said that our eye is so active that it is using, during the course of a day, 50% of our brain power is going to what we see and processing what we see. And our eyes are so amazing that every second we are identifying around 50 things. Every second we're seeing 50 things. The eye is able to do amazing things, and I love things like optical illusions and things that kind of mess with our perception and just with our eyes, because our eyes just do some amazing things. I remember growing up as a kid on Sundays, loving the fact that my parents got the Sunday paper. Anybody remember the days of getting the Sunday paper? Yeah, well, a couple of you. All right, some of you are like, "What's this? Paper boy?" There used to be a time when they would actually throw paper at your house and you would read it, right? And so I remember Sundays was especially exciting because of the comic section. It was in color on Sundays. And Calvin and Hobbes didn't just get 3 frames. He might get half a page and find out what they're up to. And, I loved especially like the Close to Home and Mother Goose and Grimm and, just all these comics. But I remember one day, life-changing moment, when I opened up the comics, there was something new in the section. It was one of those magic eye pictures. We've got an example, if you're not exactly sure what I'm talking about, right here. We had them out displayed on the TVs. Some of you may have tried to, if you're familiar with them, you may have tried to see them. This is a picture that if you stare at it in the right way, a 3D image will pop out. So in that particular one, which is out there in the lobby, is a starfish. If you stare at it, so some people do it differently. Some people try to cross their eyes, and then as they slowly uncross it, the image will come out. Now, you're not going to be able to do it probably from your seat. I mean, you would have like amazing superpowers if you could do that. That's why I wanted to put some out. The tech team did. Thank you for putting those out there so you can kind of test this out. For me, I have to get like really close to the image and almost try to stare through it until all of a sudden it just pops out. And I remember the first time that one of those magic eye pictures showed up in the Sunday comics, I was determined to see it. And like many of you that have tried this, until you figure it out, it's really difficult. And I'm sure my parents from the other room thought I was losing it one of many days. I'm sure they thought that as I'm got the comics up to my face and doing this and throwing it down and, no, I got it, just like in this war until all of a sudden I got it. And I remember to this moment as a train engine popped out of that magic eye thing, and I was hooked. Like every time I see one of those, I have to know what the secret image is. So what I want to do with our text today is this. For many of us, we don't know, or we have some confusion of what our everyday mission is of our Christian life. There's maybe some confusion. It's like kind of, if I'm not the one up there singing or if I'm not the one preaching, what do I do? What does Monday look like? What does Thursday look like for a believer? And it's sometimes it can be this nebulous, confusing thing, almost like that image that we popped up. It's the stereograph, the magic eye, where it's kind of, I'm seeing colors, but I cannot see the image. And so what I'm hoping as we examine this text is that it will kind of just pop out, and today you can leave going, okay, I have a clearer visual acuity of what faith is supposed to look like every day. So if we're to have eyes like Jesus, there's three things I want us to look at this morning. The first is that we must be observant. We must be observant. So in order to illustrate this, I have a little video that I want to show you that is going to test your observation skills. And I know some of you are like, it's summer, please don't test me. There's not going to be a grade, but I do want you to do this. So it will explain this, but I want to make sure you know so you're ready. You're amped up for this. In this video, there's going to be 3 individuals in a white t-shirt passing a basketball. And there's going to be 3 individuals in black t-shirts. And the task for you is to count how many times the individuals in the white t-shirts pass the basketball. All right, simple enough, right? Just simple observation. So let's watch the video and see how well you do.
This is a test of selective attention. Count how many times the players wearing white pass the basketball. How many passes did you count? The correct answer is 15 passes. But did you see the gorilla?
All right, so let's just kind of walk through this. How many of you got the number of passes correct? All right, quite a few of you. All right, now remember, we are in church, so let's not fudge on our results of this test. How many of you did see the gorilla? All right, quite a few. How many of you did not see the gorilla? Right? And I will admit, the first time I watched this video, I did not see the gorilla at all. So here's the principle, here's the connection, is if we're going to have eyes like Jesus, we must be observant. See, God is bringing gorillas into our everyday, and that's going to sound like a harsher connection in a moment, but you understand where I'm coming from based on the illustration, is this, like sometimes we're so focused on the wrong things that we miss the gorilla that walks right into our life. So look with me in verse 36, once again, when Jesus saw the crowds. I want you to just stop there for a moment. He saw the people. The truth in your outline is this: God is putting people in our path every day. God is putting people in our path. Sometimes we're so focused on, let's just be honest, things like, I've just got to get through this day, that we miss the people that walk right into it that God wanted us to make connection with. Let me illustrate from chapter 9. Let's jump back into chapter 9. Let's start at verse 9. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax office, and he said, "Follow me." Then jump down just one more here to verse 20. Just then, a woman who had suffered from bleeding for 12 years approached from behind, touched the tassel on his robe, for she said to herself, "If I can touch his robe, I'll be made well." But Jesus turned and saw her. "Have courage, daughter. Your faith has made you well." In just these two instances, Jesus was traveling with purpose from one destination to another. He was not aimlessly going. He was going for ministry purpose, part of his plan, sharing the good news of the kingdom. And yet, 2 times, he recognized and saw someone. In the first instance, he saw Matthew, a tax collector. Now, if you are a student of the Bible or have been around church for a while, you may know this, but others of us may not, that in the Bible, in the New Testament, tax collectors were not everybody's favorite person. They were often, from the Jewish perspective, they were sellouts to Rome, and they would overtax the people so that they could make a little bit extra themselves, because the rule was this: you just got to get Caesar what is his. Anything else you collect, you can keep. So you can see how easily that can be abused. So most people, when they passed the tax booth, did not see Matthew. But Jesus was observant and saw him. Said, "Come follow me." Then Jesus is moving through a crowd. You've been in crowds, maybe after a football game or Black Friday sale or whatever it was, where people just pressed all around you. And a lady comes up to Jesus in this crowd, just touches the tassel of his robe. Other passages that describe this in the gospel say that he felt power leave him. But in this passage, it specifically says that when he felt that, he turned around and he saw her. Because remember, in this day, for Jewish people, there is a strict law about clean and unclean. And this woman would have been an outcast because of her problem of bleeding for these 12 years. And yet Jesus turned and saw her. When he's up on that mountain and he's looking over the people, about to address them, he saw the crowd. He saw people. See, we must be observant. God is putting people in our path every day. Now, I do want to take just a brief aside to kind of look at it from another angle. If you are here this morning and you feel so alone, like nobody even notices you, I want you to also know Jesus sees you. He loves you. He is interested in you. He wants to hear from you. He wants to be involved in your life. I just want you to know He sees you. But as Jesus is going, He is seeing people. See, we often may term this divine appointments. You may have heard that term before. It's kind of this idea that God is working. And so for some of us, there's some long-standing divine appointments where we work in our neighborhood. Others are divine opportunities with maybe a stranger. You bond over a certain detergent in the Walmart detergent aisle. It's like, oh, you use it? I love that. Have you tried that? And all of a sudden, there's a moment there. Like some of you have done that, right? And it's just like, feel like you're best friends. It's like, I don't even know their name, but we use Tide. It's just like we bond over those things. During football season, don't we see that? Like I know for me, as an Auburn fan, if we see someone with an Auburn insignia, it doesn't matter who you are. In airports across the country, or even one time in London, I see someone with Auburn what do? We yell, War Eagle. I don't know you, but we've now bonded, and they're going to come over, and we're going to talk about it. To outsiders, that's kind of a scary thing for somebody to just yell across an airport, war, anything, right? It's just like, what's going on? But like, that's what we do for one another, is when we see each other, you've got your calls to one another, things that you just bond over, right? God is setting up these divine appointments, people walking across our path. So if we're going to have eyes like Jesus, we must be observant. But the second thing that we must do to have eyes like Jesus is that we must be compassionate. We must be compassionate. For some of us, and I would fall into this camp, some of us kind of as a little sub-point, it's not really in the notes, but we must learn how to be compassionate. For some in this room, you have the gift of mercy. My wife has this gift. You can go to her, and within 3 minutes, y'all will be crying together, sharing tissues, and I would probably walk by and be like, what's the big deal? I need to learn compassion. Some of you are like me, and we have very little compassion, but we must be compassionate, because when Jesus saw the people, in verse 36, it says he was moved with compassion because they were people that were weary and worn out, wandering like sheep with no direction, no leader, no shepherd. And he had compassion on them. So what I want to do is, I mentioned earlier that I like optical illusions. And so I want us to look at a couple of optical illusions, because in the passage that I want us to look at to illustrate this, there's two ways for us to view a situation, either compassionately or not. And so our eyes sometimes do this with optical illusions. So let's look at a couple of optical illusions. Number one. So this optical illusion is actually 4 perfect circles that do not touch. But I would wager a guess, if you're like me, they look like a giant spiral interlocking all over the place. Like if you look hard, I can see the middle one is a complete circle. But once I go out to the next level, just with my eyes, it's all swirls again. But let's just go to the third one. That never touches another circle. It's just an optical illusion, right? It's pretty cool. All right, let's look at another one. All right, there are 2 images in this one picture. 2 ways of viewing this same picture. How many of you see a face? Okay. How many of you see a word? All right. How many of you see both? How many of you are going, I don't see anything? It looks like my 3-year-old drew it, right? All right, so let me help you. So for the word, if you tilt your head, L-I-A-R, liar. And for the face, here's the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, chin. All right, so that is 2 ways of looking at the same image. Let's look at another one. This one kind of freaks me out. My eye just keeps going back and forth on it because it looks like the guy's looking at me from the front, and then profile. And the key is that ear. It can look like he's looking right at me, and it's just like he's looking at me. He's not. It's just weird. But that's pretty cool. All right, let's look at another one. This one, I believe, is a classic. This is like the first one I ever saw. There's 2 pictures in the same one. It's kind of like the liar in the face. How many of you see the old woman? All right. How many of you see the young woman? All right. So just because I know some people will not be able to listen unless they can see both, let me just show you. The old woman, this is her nose and her mouth, and she's kind of wearing a bonnet, and her hair is covering her eyes. That's the old woman. The young woman is looking away from you. Her nose is right there. This is her chin, and that's a necklace, and that's a hat with like kind of a veil. So she's looking off into the distance. 2 ways of looking at the same one. I think we've got 2 more. This one, you're going to look at the crosshairs. This is a little bit difficult from a distance, but the idea is if you stare at those crosshairs, the purple dots will begin to disappear, even though they never disappear. Like it's not computer trickery. Is anybody seeing even a couple of the dots kind of disappearing? It's a little bit difficult from a distance, but when we were testing this out, I was back near the sound booth, and I could about the top half would disappear on me. All right, one more. There's going to be a black dot in the middle. You're going to stare at it, and it's going to go to a black and white photo, but if you've stared at that black dot, your eyes will automatically fill in the color. So just stare at it. It's doing some sort of magical witchcraft on you, and then it's going to turn in. Did you see the color? I'm just curious. How many of you saw color and then it faded into black and white? Yeah, our eyes just are capable of being deceived, right? We are capable of being deceived because that's a black and white photo. Like if you weren't looking at that black dot and I just put that, you're like, that's a black and white photo. But by looking at that dot and the negative images, our brains filled in the color just for a second. So here's the deal. It's possible for us to be deceived or to look and perceive a situation wrongly. If we're to have eyes like Jesus, we must be compassionate. Look with me back in chapter 9 at verse 10. This is right after Jesus saw the tax collector Matthew and said, "Follow me." He's having a dinner party. Look at verse 10. While he was reclining at the table in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came as guests to eat with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when Jesus heard this, he said, "Those who are well don't need a doctor. The sick do. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I didn't come to call righteous, but sinners." See, there were two ways of perceiving this dinner party. Jesus, who saw the tax collector and the sinners and was eating with them, recognizing that those who don't need a doctor don't need a physician. But then the Pharisees saw the dinner party, and they said, "What are you doing? Eating, associating with." See, one had compassion, the other group did not. So the truth in your outline is this. We've got to remember, this will help us with compassion, those far from God will act like those far from God. I think that's just something important to remember, that none of us in this room, not a single one of us, were so good that we came to Jesus and he said, "You know what? You're not even sick. You don't need my blood. Come on into heaven." There's not one of us. Every one of us started out sick and Jesus healed us. So those who are far from God are just acting like those who don't know him, haven't been transformed by him. And that can help us be compassionate. Paul writes about this many times. He says, "Hey, you guys, the church, you don't be involved with this sin, this sin, this sin, this sin. Though many of you used to do this," it kind of reminds us, don't forget that you used to be those that were sick. See, there's this rightly or wrongly, but there must be enough of it to be true that people will say things when we invite them to church, especially those who may be far from God, and they say something to the effect of, "Oh, I can't go there. The walls would fall down if I walked in that place." You've heard something like that. Maybe it's the walls, it's the ceiling. And what they're communicating is, I'm not cleaned up enough to be with those who give the appearance that they're cleaned up enough. Jesus was hanging out with them, and he says, look, it's not those who think they're well. He didn't say the Pharisees were well. He said those who think they're well, because I'm after those who know they're sick. See, I wrestled with this in student ministry a couple of years ago. We were getting ready for our Disciple Now weekend, kind of a big event. This was back when I was in Mississippi, and there was a girl that had been in juvenile detention, and some adults from our church had been part of a juvenile detention ministry. When she got out, she began coming to our student ministry. And as this event approached, she came to me and said, I really feel like I need to go, but I noticed on the brochure that the rules say that I cannot smoke. I don't know that I can go a whole weekend without smoking, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to go. And so I'm thinking to myself, this is someone who is far from God, wrestling with actions from being far from God, but wanting to be close. Am I going to allow this rule to be an obstacle? So I called the host home that she would be staying at and said, look, this is what's going on. The young lady, you've met her. Would it be okay? Would you designate a place out in your backyard where she could smoke if she needs to? Host home said, yeah, that'll be fine. We can work that out. We want her to be there. So I called her back and said, look, I want you to do your very best not to break that rule, but I want you to be there. So if you need to, we've got a couple of designated places. The one thing I did not think all the way through is that I should have designated a place at our main entryway of worship for sign-in time. She went in, signed in, got her shirt, is standing right outside where everyone else is coming in, smoking. And I cannot tell you how many parents came to me and said, hey, there's a student outside smoking. At which point I was like, yeah, I told her she could. I meant to tell her to go out back. And I'm sure they thought, what? Now, this is not a new policy where it's just like we're going to pass out cigarettes at D now, but what I'm saying is people far from God act like those who are far from God. Let us not create unnecessary obstacles to keep them from coming close. Sometimes our lack of compassion is that obstacle. So to have eyes like Jesus, we must be observant. He's putting people in our path. Number 2, we must be compassionate. Number 3, we must be willing. We must be willing. Let's look back at our text. Jesus, having seen the crowds, felt compassion for them because they were weary, worn out like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. So here's the scenario. Jesus, having seen and been ministering to all these people, looks at the crowd, has compassion, but another thing that he notices, there's so many of them. And as he's looking over them, he calls to the disciples and said, boys, you see this crowd? It's like a harvest. I mean, it's just so many of them. Guys, I need help. We need to pray that God will send more workers because I'm doing what I can, but we need more workers in this harvest. I mean, Jesus was certainly doing his part, but he recognized, I need additional workers willing to go into the harvest. I mean, that's his whole plan. He died on the cross, was ascended, gathered the crew, and said, now go and make disciples. That's his whole plan, is recruiting people to go into the harvest. But are we willing? So here's the truth. Each of us must do our part and be part of the group. Each of us must do our part and be part of the group. They had Jesus was inviting them. I need guys, Peter, I need you to do your part. Bartholomew, I need you to do your part. But I need you to do it as part of the group going in to the harvest. Let me illustrate it this way. Earlier, we had some amazing worship music. I'm so thankful for Joel and Stacy and the musicians that give of their time. I mean, think about it. They rehearse. They come up here on Tuesdays. They rehearse privately at their home, learning music, all so that they can come and lead us in worship. They are a group. They each are responsible for their part. But what happens if they come up and the percussionist, the drummer, decides, I'm just not going to do my thing today? We lose out. What if the guitarist decides, I'm just not going to do my part today? Then all of a sudden we're a cappella with drums and, every part must do their part, but they must be part of the group. So even if let's say the bass player is doing his part, but he's not doing it as part of what the group is doing, that's a disjointed sound to our ears. If they're doing a slow song and he's just, like doing whatever, and we're like, what is going on? I mean, like, what if all the musicians are playing a song, but the singers decide they're going to sing something else? All of a sudden, I don't understand how Freebird all of a sudden got to the music of Amazing Grace. Like, it's just like, this doesn't sound right. See, everyone must do their part and be part of the group. So when we look at the church, there's an old saying that 80% of the work of the church is done by 20% of the people. 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. Can I tell you that is not a biblical model? See, the biblical model is one where everyone is like a part of the body, all working in unison under the head who is Jesus Christ. See, we cannot accomplish fully what God has for us on this hill and in this town and around this world with only 20% labor force. And Jesus has said, look at the harvest. Pray that we can get more workers. They're few. It's abundant. The laborers are few. See, it comes down to willingness. If we're going to have eyes like Jesus, we must be willing to do our part. I don't think anybody in here would disagree with me when I say we have an amazing pastor. He is so gifted, and I promise you, he does his part. But he cannot do it alone. He needs every believer in this room doing our part as part of the group going in to the harvest. It is good when you invite people to church, but that is not the ending, because Pastor John only gets 1 hour with them. You have a relationship that extends beyond that. Each one of us must do our part to be part of the group. So it's 3 things. Hopefully the 3D image is beginning to emerge, what Monday through Friday looks like. We've got to be observant. God's putting people in our path. How are we going to perceive the scenario? Are we going to be compassionate and recognize they are sick just like I once was? People act like they're far from God when they are far from God, until they have been transformed by the Son of God. But will I be willing to go out and do my part? See, let me conclude with this. There's this game, I know all of you have probably at least heard rumors of it, that has swept the globe, Pokemon Go. It is an app, and it's kind of like a game. And kind of the deal, if you're not real familiar with it, as I was not, I kind of explored it a little bit over the weekend, is you kind of GPS yourself around anywhere on the globe, and little Pokemon, which are cartoon little creatures, will pop up and you try to catch them. So if all of you were not playing Pokemon Go and I had my cell phone and I pulled it out and I'm looking through the lens of my cell phone, I might be like, hey, there is a Pokemon back there in the sound booth. And y'all be like, you've lost it. I'm like, no, I'm going to catch it. And I'm not doing this little deal. I'm trying to catch it, right? Like, I am seeing what no one else is seeing because of the lens I'm looking through. See, these guys who are playing Pokemon Go, and some of you are in this camp, are serious about it. Like, they will go to extreme lengths. I mean, people have been getting arrested because they're getting onto private property. There was like a scuffle in Minnesota this week at a veterans park because veterans were out there trying to honor veterans that have fallen, and Pokemon Go players swarmed because there were some special Pokemon, rare ones out there, and they're going crazy over it. And all of a sudden they get into a war and they're like, we're trying to honor veterans, like, we're trying to catch Pokemon. And it was just this thing. It became a thing, right? I mean, they were serious. Some of you may not realize this. I did not know this until one of our tech guys told me. This building, our property, is like in Pokemon Go, a gym, like one of these like special places you can refuel or do stuff or battle. I'm not real sure yet. But like, so people probably are driving in our parking lot. You may see them late at night, like catching Pokemon. And you're just like, man, are they searching for signal? And no, they're looking for Pokemon. Look, they are serious about seeing what most people cannot see, and yet the church does not have near the enthusiasm to go out into the harvest and have eyes like Jesus to see what he's doing and working in this city and around the globe. And why is that? So my question as we move into a time of response, Joel, if you'll come, is this. We've just kind of talked about three simple things. Maybe in this time of response, you just need to come and say, hey, I want to pray that God would help me to see, to be observant, to see those that he's putting in my path. Where is he working that I've not been paying attention to? Maybe it's a sense of compassion. And it's like, man, there are some people who maybe I've not even said anything out loud, but mentally I have judged. And I need to have compassion because they're just doing what people far from God do. They haven't met the Savior. He's looking for people, not that are healthy, but those who are sick. Maybe you just need to come and commit. Hey, I want to be willing. I've never thought about the fact that 20% is doing 80% of the work, and I want to do my part and be part of the group. And then others in this room, you may say, I've never really thought about the fact that Jesus sees me. I've kind of felt like the woman who was outcast. I've kind of felt like the tax collector where people felt taboo to talk to me, but Jesus sees me. And I want you to know this. I didn't go into this story, but it's right there at the end of chapter 9. 2 blind men came. Again, with this metaphor of sight, they came and said, Jesus, please heal us. And he gave them sight. You may be spiritually blind here today, and you've never accepted the free gift of forgiveness that Jesus gave or offers from dying on the cross and resurrecting. And today you can come and get spiritual sight.